Hi, today in the diaries I'm going to discuss several prevalent themes. The basis of it is duality, and it's the symbiotic correlations as far as motive. I'm trying to generate patterns here of motive, and there's correlations based upon the utilization of name, no matter the internal mechanisms, in order to usurp authority or transference. And one of the big things I think, one of the largest precedences is the IBM has a plant in Rochester, Minnesota, and it has a plant in Rochester, New York. And that's probably the basis of the twin towers sort of mentality. Twin cities, twin towers, the symbiotic duality transference of synthetics, no matter the consequences and costs. And I, my problem is, I'm not an anti-industrialist. My problem is the overboard nature of it, and lack of controls because in the system itself. So, and I'm going to cite a few things. One of the IBM is headquartered in Anarchy, New York, which is a close suburb of New York City, where there's also a place called the Louis Calder Natural Preserve that's affiliated with Fordham University, a Jesuit Catholic university. And as I spoke before, the Jesuit connectivity, like I said, one of the cast regulator keys for my stunted pygmy glass ceiling happens to be JV, and then there's this organization called the Jesuit Volunteers. And so basically, it's just Mardi Gras, free loot, everybody dispersing through me, while I'm not relegated to touch any of it, basically. And you can look at it in any number of ways. You could look at it like the state of Louisiana, where the Mississippi River, Waterboy, the river runs through the state of Louisiana. The problem is, and there's a lot of derivative sources of water generated through the basins and canals and bayous and swamps and things like that. But with me, what they've done is they've turned me into the Sahara Desert boned ass dry like a iguana, the lizard king sort of mentality, like Morrison used to say. And I'm just going over methods, basically. And this is, like I said before, to preface this, in case, theoretical. I think I'm being used, and I think I'm being used as a slave because I get no benefit, and they're just basically like a pipeline running it through me, and nothing sticks. It's like everything I eat goes straight out. There's nothing there. Then you can call it like a trophy head hanging on a wall, and the body, and whoever killed the body gets all the meat. That sort of mentality, and the dispersal of all the steaks gets all the distributive industrial manufacturing capabilities. But I don't think that's necessarily. And it's a dangerous gamble, as you've seen, because of the lack of competent controls, because of the necessity of the shadow games cover up. Because when you have nefarious chicanery at the heart, the source material of it, it opens the door to all sorts of extortion expansion. Just chaos, 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 sprawl, because all they have to do, it's really not a hit. It's not a secret, it's not hidden or any sort of thing. It's just a matter of, and so that's why I think you have the free loot barbarism and the massive anarchy going on everywhere and anything. So I'm going to talk about, Jungian synchronicity is one of the methods in my fiction or nonfiction book. I write about correlations. I am basically using code as my story. I'm telling the story by dissecting code and synchronicity, Jungian synchronicity. And Carl Jung happened to attend Fordham University in New York, which is affiliated with the Louis Calder Nature Preserve, and also with IBM. If you use the same logic based upon IBM Rochester, New York, IBM Rochester, Minnesota. You know, it's a similar. That's a precedent set. Same thing as Marathon Oil, Marathon Music. You know, it's got the same name. There's real, but then again, it just that's the door that's wide open about it. And the problem I have is I'm kidnapped for long, long periods of time while I'm trying to get access funds through these certain channels, and that's motive in my estimation for the stalking lynch mobs, which have haggard me or hassled me. So you've got this premise called maximum minimum that Jung also cites as far as validation valuation. And I did have a great grandparents named Max and Minnie. And what, in my estimation, it's more of the macro micro perspective. But in the absolute literal illiterates, as I call them, because of the lack of logic based in the literalism, there's the maximum and the minimum. The absolute it's like absolute zero, absolute maximum, absolute minimum, and the gray area is all the marrow meat. There's a lot of fatty marrow meat in the middle, but the principles are stuck on the end, the alpha and the omega. And what they've done is they've just whittled away the thin ends to where there's nothing on the outside. So I am relegated to the minimalist perspective while donating the maximum, and that's one of the connectivity postulate theorems that pertains to the scenario. And like I said before, Jesuit, there's a Loyola Marymount connection. There's a connection to Jesuit High School in New Orleans on Bank Street. There's a connection to the Loyola system of universities, the Loyola Marymount in Lyons and Los Angeles. But I'm getting the shaft, and I'm supplying, in my estimation, a lot of the basis of the system. It would be like, they're trying to call it solar, or whatever you want to say, but I mean, that's the basis of it. It's solar, but it's a microscopic dot of solar energy, if you understand, because of the nature of blocking out. They're trying to hide the sun. It's like they don't want anybody to see the sun or its effects. Well, they want to see the effects, but they don't want you to see it, the sun, that sort of premise. So then you got the separator fracturing of the church and the state. St. Louis Cathedral being a main source, in my estimation, and the state of Louisiana, in which the duality of these two systems. And you've got the genetics and the machine system. You've got the A and the M, the agriculture and the mechanical. But then again, you're playing both sides with the max and the min of the source principle. Therefore, you're gambling on being cheap, basically, or you're gambling on being passion fruits, is what I call it. You're just passion fruit gambling. And the repercussions are you're unleashing the army of darkness upon the world because you refuse to address the underlying issue built upon civilized law and order. There's no civilized law and order. You're calling it freedom, but really it's anarchy, free chaos, sprawl. And so Nietzsche had this perspectivism, which is based upon exposure. So what they've tried to do with I have a maximum exposure perspectivism, but they're trying to relegate me to a minimum. That's the whole dog's stunted pygmy motive, is the perspective. They want my perspective to be shrunk way down deep to where I can't see the schemes of what's going on. And because the connectivity of my neural capacity, connectivity to legal law channels globally through astronomical channels, and those that are able to decipher. What they're trying to do, in my estimation, as I've said before, is block the stars from the sky. Or they're trying to they want to surreal the pattern so you can't read them. You might see the light. They love it, they love that acid, that's phantasmagoria, because they don't want you to see the reality pattern. They want to see just the spiraling lights and all that sort of thing. The phantasmagoria, surrealism, rather than the reality of astronomy for those that are able to do it. So it's trying to hide astronomy in surreal skies through muddying the water or cloud smoke machines, or they use all sorts of varying channels of. That's when you get into the crazy chaos of the art and entertainment industry and the desecration of the source. They're trying and the desecration of name. That's why they try to take my name and make it not matter because other people are using my name. But then you got the duality of the Rochester and the Rochester, Minnesota, the Twin Cities or the Twin Towers of Minnesota and New York, connecting to the Jesuit banks of it's the Mississippi Jesuit banks in St. Louis Cathedral that they used me and my family for, even though we're slaves, building a pyramid, the pyramid of Ponzi schemes. And so they're desecrating the source to try to bury and to try to whittle away or erode any support to avoid reciprocity, the dine and dash, basically, of what's going on. What I've been seeking to do is I'm trying to audit and analyze the decimation of the source with the motive of trying to protect the entirety of the structure. What you've got now is you've just built this amalgamated mass that threatens to topple over at any, that's where you get into the massive exposure. You're exposed like New Orleans, even worse though, because you're, the creation of the global, in the reality, there's a lot more storm. It's a lot worse than New Orleans to be. It would be more akin to the Loop. The Loop is at offshore of the mouth of the Mississippi. It's the unloading point for all the super tankers around the world that bring in the oil. So you're really exposed because you're using a bunch of loopholes and piggybacking and gaming the system. So any sort, it's desperation exposure because of the mass exposure to chaos and the sprawl. So what I've been trying to do is I want to, calling for responsible audit of the system itself. And then again, I'm not greedy, but I think I deserve percentages on my point. Minute percentages are worth billions of dollars in my estimation from what I've dug up. So I mean, what I'm saying is finder's fees, that sort of thing, lawyers' fees, the 15%. They don't. That's one of the there's an animosity towards because they screwed up so bad that they want to keep it's the junky gambling system of rather than admitting that you had a problem and trying to solve the problem. It's like the addicted heroin addict, cocaine addict, steroid addict, and smoker and degenerate and then alcoholic. They just want to keep it on and they don't want to try to fix it. They just going to keep on plowing through, and that's the system itself because of a lack of control. And drugs are loopholes, basically. Drugs can be construed as loopholes in the system, designing code or patterns, hacks, whether it be legal drugs or loopholes, or because of the extreme nature variable mass, or the illegal drugs. So, I mean, it's like there's a lot of loopholes in the system that are really screwing things up. And nobody's willing to fix them. And they definitely, that's one of the reasons, motives for burying my story in estimation.